The first maxim, to desire only to please God, that is, to be just.
And now I think before I start talking about specifically the first maxim, I'll just say a word about what he means by perfection, because they're called the maxims of Christian perfection. And perfection is a difficult word because none of us is perfect. In fact, we would reject the idea of being perfect. We sin, and we're always imperfect in a way. And I think what Rosmini means, he is reminding us that we are pilgrims. We're on a journey of faith, and part of the journey is to strive to become a better person. So by striving to become a better person, I think that's what he means by perfection. So it's a journey rather than a state. That's what I'm trying to say. He wrote these maxims shortly after he was ordained priest. He was ordained priest, I think, about 1824 or someone like that. And he started the order in 1828, when he'd been a priest for 4 or 5 years. But he started to write the maxims the year before he went to Calvario to start the order, and he eventually published them first in 1830, and they are a very precious heritage. They really encapsulate his spirituality. He says himself that it was based on 2 principles which he arrived at when he was first ordained. When he was first ordained, he had ambitions to do all sorts of wonderful things, and all of them failed. So all the things he chose to do failed. And then he reflected and he thought, well, the things actually I succeed at are the things which people ask me to do. When I want to do something off my own bat, I don't seem to get anywhere. If I respond to what other people say, or do, or ask, or request, and if it's reasonable, then I find I can be successful at that. So he made these 2 principles. It's called his principle of passivity. And the first principle is, I will not undertake any work of charity on my own initiative, but apply myself to the business of amending my own life. Now that's quite a negative statement. But then you go on to the second statement, which complements it. He says, I will not refuse any work of charity when the providence of God offers it to me or brings it to my attention, and I will not prefer one work to another, but I will do all that is asked of me with equal enthusiasm. So he's got these 2 complementary things. I'm not going to move on my own bat, of my own initiative, but when I'm asked to do something, I put everything into it. So that is why he called his institute the Institute of Charity, because that leads you into charitable works inevitably. Sometimes Rosmini has been criticised by saying, well, isn't it a bit selfish to say, the first thing you must concentrate on is amending your own life? What about everybody else? You see? And Rosmini said, well, actually, if I were to say, I am going to convert you, I'm going to make you a Catholic, I'm going to convert you, right? I can't. I can't change you. I can't change your mind. You choose to become a Catholic. You choose to say yes or no. I can try to persuade you. I could even threaten you. I could cajole you, but I could bring pressure to bear, or I could gently lead you, but you have the choice. And Rosmini is insistent that the only person really we can actually change is ourselves. So we have to start with ourselves, whether we like it or not. To amend my own life is the first responsibility I have. And he said, he gives us these 6 maxims as a way of doing it. So if we look at the first maxim, he says, to desire only to please God, that is to be just. To be just, well, probably a better word in some ways is to be holy, because we think of justice as something which we impose on people. You know, I imposed. I'm what should we say? I'm a judge, and I impose justice by sentencing you to go to prison. You see, that we have that view of justice. But actually, if we look at what the scriptures say about justice, particularly the Old Testament talks about justice as really our relationship with God, seeking to be closer to God. This is the biblical meaning, to have a loving bond with God. In the New Testament, we hear that the word used about the publican, the Pharisee and the publican in that particular, and it says the publican went home justified. He was regarded as just by God because he admitted that he was a sinner, that he was helpless, and that he needed totally the help of God. And that was to be just, you see. So it's a very subtle meaning, really. It's not I'm imposing something on you, or it's somehow there's something that I'm receiving rather than imposing. So the biblical meaning of justice is found particularly, I think, in the beautiful books of the Old Testament, like the Song of Songs and the book, the prophecy of Hosea. And there you get this sense of the chosen people, Israel, having a love affair with God. Mm-hmm. It's a love affair rather than a business or anything like that. God loves these people, and they, in response, love him. And that's why the Song of Songs is it's a story of love, human love. Yeah. But it's really a parable of the way in which God loves us, and we should love God. And that puts justice in a very human frame. You see, it doesn't look as if it's harsh at all. What is noticeable, however, about Rosmini's idea of justice is that he doesn't talk at all much. He refers to it incidentally, but he doesn't directly talk about what we would call social justice. And nowadays the Church emphasizes social justice very strongly. In the latest encyclical of the Pope, there's quite a lot about his teachings on social justice and his summarizing the teaching of the popes over a couple of hundred years really, about social justice. The rights of people to a job, the rights of people to a decent living, to a living wage, all those things which are to do with social justice are things that the Church has to be involved in. Rosmini, in fact, belongs to an age which thought differently. In Rosmini's time, if you were an aristocrat and born into a wealthy family, that was God's will. God willed to make you rich and me poor, you see, and we had to accept it, you see. And there was no injustice in that. That was the way it was. God, he accepted that he belonged to a ruling class. He was born into a very wealthy family, and their job was to run businesses and to look after people, but they had the power. Democracy was really in its infancy in that time. Rosmini, in many ways, he believed in democracy, but he believed really in monarchy. He believed that a person had the job to rule, and so social justice came into the Church's teaching long after Rosmini died. It comes on with Leo XIII, with his great encyclical Rerum Novarum, which was about 1880, I think, which was 30 years after Rosmini died. And that introduced a totally different sort of series of teachings by the Church, which are very strong. I mean, the present Pope, for instance, is very strong on the just war theory and whether it's true. In fact, he effectively rejects the idea that there can be a just war. He said war is always evil. It's no solution to anything. You may defend yourself against an aggressor, but to be aggressive or to to have these terrible destructive weapons as a way of threatening somebody else is basically wrong, and he's calling upon the world to disarm. Very strong. Whether anybody will ever listen, I doubt. But anyway, that's the way it is. But this is the Pope's teaching. So in that sense, that's another form of social justice. That's really, I think, the main thing I have to say about this. It's the foundation of his teaching. The first maxim is foundational. If you don't live justly, if you don't give people their due, if you don't accept the due yourself, then in a way you're being dishonest, and you can't have that sort of basis for your living. Okay?
Okay.